And we're not angels. You know,
Who is?
we're when we go out and we have fun. We get drunk and sometimes we muck about a lot.
Over the last 40 years, many subcultures have been introduced into British society, the majority of which would have been perceived by public perception to be extinct, giving way for new waves of social expressive groups. However, the strength of a certain British subculture during the 1970s continued to grow, to a point where social identity became a defining importance, where establishing one's character and personality by appearance was essential. The skinhead culture was one of great magnetism, attracting mostly working class social types to a culture infused by reggae music and a living ethic to look presentable and smart to their own culture's perception. Mods, teddies, rockers and rude boys were all contrasting social types of these times, many of which would conflict with other cultures to maintain their livelihood in the proud name of their culture. Interested in a possible existence today, we went searching for an example of the skinhead culture in the modern age. After 2 weeks of research, it became obvious that the only way to contact this certain social group was to advertise our documentary on skinhead internet forums, something which quickly highlighted a lot of problems. The media's role throughout this transformation contributed massively to the way skinheads are perceived today, making it extremely difficult to convince sceptical skinheads that our documentary was not focusing on the general stereotype. Patrick Wilson has been an original skinhead since the early 80s and claims to still be a part of the scene today. Although not as prominent 20 years ago, Patrick insists that younger skinheads like his 14-year-old friend Benny are helping to maintain the skinhead existence into the future. In agreement to do the interview, Patrick insisted that we did not discuss any matters relating to politics, racism or violence that may have stuck with the culture's negative stereotype in past years.
I was a mod in the early 80s, late 70s. Used to hang around Bexley Heath, Welling, Erith area in London, and I got so many kickings from skinheads that I decided better join them. So the hair came off, the boots went on, and there we were. I used to go down to London most weekends to visit a friend in Bexley Heath, and that's where I really started seeing, skinheads in general, and soon joined them.
So you were saying that, you've been a skin since the early 80s?
Yeah.
So you've been a skin from then, so what changes as the culture's seen from then to now? I mean, how different is it being a skinhead now?
I think that there's been a large sort of push back. Skinheads in the 80s were scruffier, I guess. Not all, but a great many. Big boots, bleached jeans, Fred Perrys were pretty much the norm. Bomber jackets, whereas now, as we certainly for myself, as you get older, you look back past that era, back to the original skinheads of the late 60s, very early 70s, who were a lot smarter than we were in the 80s. And if you can afford it, you'll go and buy the garb of the day of the late 60s, early 70s, which makes big money on eBay. I mean, really big money. Original JTEX shirts will make up to £100 each. I mean, we'll nowadays travel 100 miles to go to a do. In the 60s, you'll find that every second lad in, say, areas of London would have been a skinhead. You wouldn't need to. There was no need to travel. Everything that you needed would have been there. The do's would have been local, and you didn't need. The only travelling that would have been done would to be to football.
Today's skinhead events seem to be so far in between, not only showing a landslide in the culture's population, but also expressing a very strong passion for those that still live as skinheads. For most it has been decades, devoted to a nostalgic way of life which will never change. The music, fashion and dancing are all pinnacle elements that encourage original skinheads to reminisce of the times when their subculture was at its strongest.
I'd love to go back and do it all again. I wouldn't change any of it, but I'd love to go back and do it all again. We used to go up to Great Yarmouth on a Saturday and get slaughtered and try and find a mod maybe.
After spending some time with Patrick, I couldn't doubt his passion and enthusiasm for his chosen way of life. However, I found it hard to contemplate what Benny would be expected from the words of his role model. It seems the experience of a flourishing skinhead culture 20 years ago does not exist now, leaving me to question Benny's vulnerability as well as Patrick's persistence to maintain his environment.
I've got a lot of really loose friends just there, but my close friends would understand, but they just don't ask questions really, because they like me because I'm their mate. They don't condemn me for anything. You know, I'm not going to moan about it, but I do get a lot of hassle of people. But you know.
Would this have been a problem 20, 30 years ago?
No, because we were there in numbers.
Yeah.
And we were deemed to be violent, therefore people, I mean other youth cults would, you know, but that went both ways. But the youth of today don't seem to have the sort of cults that we had mods, there were still Teds, punks, skins, all sorts of things. I mean, there really doesn't seem, the fashion, if you like, of the modern youth seems very bland to me.
Yeah.
That could just me getting old, you know. There really doesn't seem to be the sort of youth culture, the breadth of youth culture that there was.
Do you just think it's a bit of a shame now for kids like Benny who want to, be a skinhead and just want to get on with it,
Well, I don't think Benny has a problem because he has become a skinhead. Yeah. He has got, a lot of his friends are slightly older, but he's got something, in my opinion, that a lot of kids don't have, which is, if you like, an extended family, because that's how I see it. It's an extended family. Going from Norfolk, a rural community, down to London on an almost weekly basis and meeting up with people down there and being accepted. And I think that in the early 80s, and this is by no means across the board, but there were a lot of people came in who had problems, family problems or whatever it was, and it didn't matter what your problems were. You could leave those at home, you could meet up with your mates.
So it's kind of like an escapism, isn't it?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it's much more than that, but when you were out in the town with your mates, your problems weren't there. And I do think a lot of people, possibly myself included, used it as that.
It was obvious that Patrick and Benny had a unique relationship, a relationship that maybe would seem also natural within the subculture. Nonetheless, it became a common occurrence where Benny would listen eagerly to the stories Patrick had to tell, possibly in anticipation of what was yet to come, or more realistically, a fairy tale of an era put to rest by the progression of time. Benny's enthusiasm made me believe that unlike many boys of his age, this might not be a fad or a temporary interest. And with such an enthusiastic apprentice such as Benny, Patrick must feel assured that maybe the original skinheads aren't an endangered species. Regardless, I wasn't totally convinced that Benny's focus would have been so strong without the powerful influence of his elders.